Welcome to Blake Street Banter, where one of us knows what the word banter means. The other two are just along for the ride. Noah, say what's up.
Hello, hello. I'm not the main star of the show today, so let's say what's up to Chris. Welcome in.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on this Tuesday night. People are listening to this a little bit later than when we are recording. We're recording on November 19th. The 40-man roster was just announced. So we are talking with Chris Forbes, the director of player development. But before we get into the 40-man stuff, before we get into all the prospect stuff, Chris, I need to know, what is your favorite all-time baseball movie?
Ooh, that's a good question. It depends on the mood, probably how I wake up. I can watch The Natural probably about every day.
Oh, that's a good one.
Certain scenes in it, obviously. And then love The Sandlot. Love Bull Durham. There's a low-key one, and I was up in the Cape Cod League Hall of Fame ceremony this weekend. And I was talking about, there's a movie called Everybody Wants Some, which is kind of a low-key baseball movie, but it's a college baseball team, I think, in the early 80s. And it takes them through the first three days of school, starting fall baseball. And I think it's hilarious, and nobody's ever seen it. It's the same guys that did Dazed and Confused.
That's interesting. This is the first time I've ever heard of that movie. Everybody Wants Some.
Yeah. Okay. Well, next time we link up, you guys can tell me what you think.
Yeah, I'm going to have to. I thought you were going to go with Summer Catch with that Cape Cod reference.
Yeah. The problem is I was up there. Let me see. I was up there in 2005, and I think it came out maybe right before that. And everybody up there complained the fact that it wasn't filmed on the Cape.
Okay. Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, it was filmed, I think, in some of the fields for the Coastal Plains League in North Carolina.
Yeah, it's just not the same.
And I did not see Jessica Biel that summer. So that was the tragedy in itself, yeah.
Right, that might have changed some minds there too. Yeah, that's always a fun movie. Me and my friends used to quote that all the time in college. Just fix the game of my life. Let's be together. Just randomly. Such a silly movie. I love it though. But yeah, can you give us a quick synopsis of just like your typical responsibilities? Like, what's the big picture? What are you doing on a weekly, monthly basis? Just kind of get an intro into what you do as the head of the player development.
Well, obviously, run the system in its entirety, from the complex league to AAA. Obviously, I kind of have some crossover and cross-pollination with the big league club. But, managing that staff of 66 and 175 players in spring training, 165 active players in during the summer, and pretty much everything in between.
Yeah, and you mentioned some crossover with the big league squad. I guess I'm wondering, how do you interact with the other parts of the baseball operations department really throughout the year, whether it be off season or during the season?
Well, I mean, again, I think we have really tried to open up some collaborative spaces. Our working relationship with the amateur scouting staff and the pro scouting staff. I cut my teeth in the amateur scouting space here. So that dialogue, what we're looking at, what we're seeing, how we can help develop, I really want to keep those lines and those spaces of collaboration open. And so that, when I talked about the cross-pollination of a small front office, I mean, we do collaborate a lot. And try to, because you're not just developing people here, right? You're developing players. You are developing people, and you try to find the next wave of, when they put me out to pasture, the next wave that's going to take over and make this thing flourish.
Just constantly working together.
Yeah. And I think that's because you get different points of view, and I think that's important, because I just don't ever want to be one of those guys that's stuck. Well, this is how we've always done it. We've made some exponential changes in the minor leagues that we can talk about, just as we try to grow, the 21st century baseball player and truly create a culture that they can flourish in, full of empowerment and accountability. And But constantly teaching and growing, and I love picking brains. I still go to the National Coaches Convention. Obviously, I was a college coach for 11 years. I just love hearing different terminologies or different ways of doing it, and just kind of seeing how you can what you end up doing is you try to steal it, make it your own. That's at the end of the day, but when I go to the affiliates, I love to watch early work for other teams, just kind of see what they're doing, how they're doing it, how their players are reacting to it, So, you just kind of make an area of growth.
Yeah. Like it's always like you're just constantly looking and watching and seeing what you can use and bring into it. So like over your whole career, what have you kind of seen change the most, like from a pitcher standpoint, a hitter standpoint, from, like you said, the 21st century player? Like how was it in the 20th century a few years back? Like,
well, I mean,
changed drastically?
I think they're bigger, faster, stronger. I think that the way they train, whether it's sports specific or, there's obviously things you miss. You miss the ability to have a 3-sport athlete. You just don't see that as much. There's a lot more specialization now. But just how they're trained, the ability, the not only from a technique standpoint, but obviously the biggest jump is probably technology.
Yeah.
Whether that's good or bad, it's still kind of TBD. And, how you use it for the individual, there's things we can use in the collective, but, if you're doing player development right, or even college coaching right, you're coaching to the individuals, and then obviously you've got your team goals, but you're coaching the individuals as you're developing these guys. And so whether it's the player plans or, something you're doing in a performance lab setting or something you're doing in the strength and conditioning center, it needs to be geared around what the player is and who he is, and how that can resonate and how that makes him better. So there's been a lot of improvements in so many ways, and their ability. The one thing you do worry about, there's a lot more distractions now. I grew up, I didn't have a cell phone. In fact, the internet wasn't even around. I was in college when the internet came out.
Yep.
And these kids, they hear it. You can get a guy locked in and feel good about where he is, and he gets on the bus in Hartford, he's going to Akron, and the next thing you know, he's on Pitching Ninja or hitting Twitter, and now he's got a leg kick when he gets off the bus. Or they can easily see what other people are saying about them, and I think that affects them a lot. So you do try to grow them in that way as well, of understanding what matters.
And that's hard. We talk about that every once in a while with the guys that we talk to, and a lot of them talk about just kind of being humble and understanding how that's different. Like Connor Stain, like he is one that kind of leans into all that stuff. He's not really scared of the social media. Like he understands what that is. And then you have other guys that just stay away from it completely. And like you're talking about, like working with players individually and how they interact with that. I guess you just kind of meet the players and go, this is what's kind of happening and going with, or how do we coach the mental piece of the player, the person?
Well, twice a year we do, spring training is obviously our biggest venue, right? 175 players and down there for a month with them, the ability to kind of set up a certain space where, whether it's Nora or Shelby, Corey sets them up to come down to talk to the group. We do a mini camp right after the draft. We immediately do the social media training part, because it can be such a great tool and it can grow your personal brand. On the same time, it could be a detriment as you get kind of sped up or you're in a reactive mindset and you react to what somebody's saying about you, which, would scare me to death about Connor Stain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Versus just like, okay, let me just kind of put the midnight rule on this, file this game, and not worry about what's happening or what people are saying about it. So it is such a growth, and I'm going to knock on wood, because we've been pretty lucky with guys that recognize, that can stay out there forever. And, MLB's put in a huge program too, as well, to help these guys understand, what social media can mean to their careers and where it could be a detriment. they have people that'll go through, per the player's request, go through their likes, go through, so they're starting to dig up, anything from when you were a high school freshman in 2012, which you can only imagine what they're liking on social media at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that stuff with who was it, Hader coming up when he was in the All-Star game. Like all that's, you have to be concerned about it.
Yes, you do.
All the time. The internet's full of some dirty sleuths out there that are just kind of scary at like how much time they spend on that kind of stuff.
I know.
It's gross.
They're very good at it. They could have cured cancer by now.
Yeah, no, exactly. No joke. So yeah, today was kind of a big day. The 40-man roster, Zach Veen was added to it. How much kind of talk was about possibly adding a second guy? Because the Colorado Rockies don't really add just one around this time of year. They've usually added 3 or 4, at least in the past few years that we've covered this. But like, was there any discussions maybe adding a few other guys?
Well, I think going into spring training, when you start having some big picture talks like this, you looked at 3 guys initially in Jaden Hill, Drew Romo, and Zach Veen. That okay, this is going to be the year. We've really got to, what I call kind of advanced development, advanced refinement. You've got to get these guys in a spot to where they're never going to be fully ready for their big league debuts, but you got to get them as close as you can. And as we got through, obviously Drew and Jaden debuting this year and getting added, that it came down to Veen, and had some dialogue about a couple other players, either the readiness or the redundancy on the roster, which is something that I think we've fallen into a trap. Occasionally we have too many guys that look the same, and have the same type of skill sets, and trying to get into an area where we're developing a little more contrast to it. Whether the pieces are the mental makeup or what he does physically or how he fits in a clubhouse, et cetera, all that kind of goes into making these decisions. And so, ultimately it came down to Zach today.
Yeah. And that makes 100% sense. Like I was going to ask you about the pitching. Like you're kind of talking about kind of the players that are similar, right? And it feels like you guys have been adding a diverse group of pitching together. Like you have these crafty lefties, you have the like LeBaron Johnson, the overtop righty who can throw hard. Then you have Solely the Wizard that's coming funky lefty.
Yeah.
Like how much of that is like a plan that you all created and like pushing it forward to come with it?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of that starts, with the amateur scouting staff and our dialogue that we have with the scouting staff and the relationships over there, and how, you don't want them all to look the same. I think if you go back here, and I've obviously been here a while, probably too long, but you think back to the sinker slider dynamics that we thought was going to unlock. And then we had a bunch of sinker slider guys, and then you started kind of digging into certain metrics with pitches and pitchers. And you're never going to truly unlock, some sort of magic bullet that all of a sudden, oh, he's a Coors Field guy. I hate to quote Clint Hurdle this early in the conversation, but, it's guts and nuts that make the Coors Field guys. It truly is, and so now you start looking at stuff and how the stuff plays, knowing, that there's going to be a downtick at home. They're going to have to adjust their sights on a breaking ball. They're going to have to, when you're going up, you got to get it up. When you're going in, you got to get it in. There's certain refinement pieces in an environment like no other place at the major league level that have to happen. So you kind of start digging into the mental makeup of guys, not just, what he's pitching with. You also kind of dig into, a lot more contrast to him. I mean, Sean Sullivan's a great example. Sean Sullivan 10, 15 years ago is not a Rocky. No. And then you kind of find the outliers. And I think that's something that they've done a fantastic job at is kind of presenting a player and taking some risk in the draft. Now that you cut down the draft to a 20 rounds, you can't just throw, 38 pitchers against the wall and hope some of them stick. I mean, you really have to plan out. You have to not only see what you see from a traditional or organic scouting standpoint, but what are the metrics telling you? How do you link up? What are we seeing now from our analytic group? And how can we match that up to make the best decision on a player? But I've just loved, the different looks and the contrast to the guys that are coming out of the draft.
Yeah, and it feels like in recent drafts, there's been more of a shift to essentially only drafting college arms when looking at pitchers. Is that just something that happens when all of a sudden the analytics department has a lot more data to crunch and look at in terms of comparing it to a guy that's, a lot younger, but he's coming out of high school and you might not know how altitude and different scenarios impact that arm?
I do think that helps. When you have such a sample size, now, whether it's you're rolling through TrackMan or you're rolling through Hawkeye or you're rolling through Synergy or some of these avenues that not only the colleges have, but, the collegiate summer leagues have, and you can kind of see this timeline of a guy to kind of recognize his readiness. And, the shift in baseball, I mean, it used to be, you take a high school kid, you're looking 5 or 6 years down the road for him to debut, and he's had X amount of innings in the minor leagues. At the point now that, they're getting up to the big leagues a lot faster than they ever have. I mean, it was, Seth Halverson was a little bit older, but that was a calendar year that he was a pro, and I mean, he debuted in his first full season. There was guys like Evan Justice that went fast. You start to see these guys, and so it's nice, when you have a college guy that's kind of, you've seen him compete on a Friday night in the SEC, or you've seen kind of that stage that he's able to acclimate easier to the levels. And then, now you're adding the component of what you're trying to do in development that we can try to get them on a track faster. And, the draft kind of tells you which way you want to go. I think behind the scenes, I was not ready for even college when I came out of high school. I probably wasn't even ready for the Army if I went that way,
Right.
So, some guys are better suited going to college, and sometimes we force their hand, in the draft with the compensation package. But sometimes, the draft just kind of lends itself to being a heavy college or heavy dominant draft, where maybe a guy behind the scenes has priced himself out of where we're comfortable taking him, et cetera. You'd like to have it as balanced as you can, having some young guys and making sure the classes look that way. But it's been, there's always one little brother in every one of our classes here recently.
Yeah. One of those is Jackson Cox from a few years ago.
Yeah.
You got the TJ crew. I don't know what else to say, but Gabe Hughes, Jordy Vargas. Can you speak on any of their progress going forward? I know Gabe did the Arizona Fall League. But any progress on that?
I mean, that was a fun 48 hours for a farm director, because I think it was Jordy went down on Friday, and then Sunday, the first night of the draft, Gabe and Jackson went down within about 45 minutes of each other. So those were fun phone calls. But we finished Instructional League in early October. And obviously we were building Gabe up for the Fall League. He went through his rehab process almost seamlessly, which is not a shock from his work ethic. But, it also takes a lot of luck. It is a major surgery. We did get Jordy and Jackson on the game mound during Instructional League. So we are expecting a fully healthy 2025. And honestly, getting those three gentlemen back for 2025 almost feels like Bill made a trade.
Yeah.
Those are three of our top 30 pitchers, or top 30 prospects, excuse me. So, I'm really excited. It's excited to see their faces when they're on the game mound and competing. Of course, Gabe, felt like game one, he should have had his feel back. And, that's classic Gabe Hughes right there.
Yeah. He seems to have that mental makeup ready to go.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. He wants to, and I'm hoping this is the year. You know, he will get his innings in. He'll be protected a little bit in the first half, and then we'll let him go, let him eat.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with pitchers. Brody Brecht, dude's got a big body, big fastball, great mindset right out of the draft. Announcing his presence with the Rockies with that one-word tweet. And so I'm just curious, what's the work like in the lab looking like for him right now? We don't usually see the Rockies go after guys with off the chart stuff and lacking control, but it feels like you guys got one here.
Well, I think what you saw was, for him, probably the tale of two Big Ten seasons, really. And he started showing some trends as the year went on. That he's going to be a force to be dealt with. It's hard to gauge his ultimate role right now. The easy thing to do would be, hey, throw him in the bullpen and let him sprint. But I think right now you try to focus on getting him as much mound time as possible. You're right about the body. I mean, he is built. I wish I looked like that on my best day. And he's got the personality to go with it. Obviously, the work ethic. So in those lab settings, you start to see a guy that is just a few ticks away from timing up this whole thing, and that's going to be the key is really keeping him present. Him understanding how this first year is going to look, because he didn't touch a ball since the Big Ten championships when we got him. So we took our time kind of building him back up, knowing that we were just going to try to get a few innings in during instructional league, which we did. Right now on the lab setting, just try to get him in there, understanding the throwing program, what he needs in the throwing program, and just really teach him how to be a pro that first summer. So I'm expecting he'll be in fantastic shape at spring training. Not much to do up there in Iowa besides that workout in the winter, and we'll let him go. And if we start him, say in Fresno, he'll be piggybacked. Just to kind of protect him. Knowing that he has not carried a big workload, even though I guarantee he can, just by the way he's built. But he's got two pitches right now that you really like. He showed a feel for that third. So I do think he's going to be a 3-pitch guy, and he is one of the guys that I think he needs the innings. So we'll kind of see how the starter goes, and then you make a decision after that.
Yeah, he's one of our favorites. So we were lucky enough to talk to him after he was drafted, and there was a few moments that I just wanted to run through a brick wall with him, like the mental capacity that you were talking about, like just the maturity of a young guy like that. Like he seems to understand it and get it, and like he knows how to play with the chip on his shoulder and use that chip for good, as opposed to the other way. And I don't know, I was just really impressed with him and his just kind of the mindset going all with it.
I think that if you look at, because there's guys that do want to have that chip on their shoulder, and there's guys that can navigate the competitive world that way. There's other guys where you recognize you kind of need to take it off for them, and let the failure happen. But he's coming out of University of Iowa is probably an under the radar from a research and development standpoint, one of the best college baseball programs in the nation. They have a system set up to develop R&D people. And their former pitching coach, who I think is now with Detroit, Robin Lund, was big in early on into using the tech, using the biomechanics, et cetera, screening guys the right way and kind of growing it. So I think when you go to Iowa, you do come out of there with a pretty good feel for not all the metrics, because you don't need them all, but what you need and how that can grow you and how you can use it to your advantage. And I think that's where Brody is.
Yeah, and that's just, does that give him like a leg up? Not like necessarily like a leg up, but like, is that easier to work with somebody who already kind of knows how to use the data for good, as opposed to trying to teach somebody how to use the data?
I think it's good in the sense that he's already in a place, it can be extremely overwhelming.
Yeah.
For a lot of players, we had when Rapsodo came out, and it was and I know we get hammered for being some sort of archaic discover and fire organization, but I mean, we have everything everybody's got.
Yeah.
And we use everything everybody's got. But when Rapsodo came out, it probably was 6 years ago, and it's already obsolete on the pro side, but I remember some of our players looking at that, and it was like you were asking them to, take a coast to coast flight and you're the pilot. I need you to land this DC-10 in LAX. And then there was guys like Lucas Gilbreth who bought one, and knew probably could have taken it apart blindfold and put it back together. But one of the things we did with Lucas, and one of the things that like when you're getting back on Brody that we won't need to do, but Lucas, it was important for Steve Merriman, one of our pitching coordinators at the time, to tell him what, he was looking at every number and telling him, hey, this is who you are, and this is why these numbers are important to you. Don't worry about those numbers. And you do find that a lot now with guys as we're teaching them what to look at, what's important. You want a bullpen session to be the bullpen session, and you're working on execution over the rubber, or you're working on execution over the plate, and then we'll go through your numbers. I think it gets a little frustrating when the pitchers let go and they immediately turn around and want to see the iPad just to kind of see what that pitch is doing, instead of, hey, finish the pitch. Let's finish the sequence, and then we'll truly go through this stuff as we're able to digest it in a better spot. So it's really, having a guy like Brody come in here and really know what he needs is fantastic. The other guys between, Brandon Stone, our coordinator of performance science, and Emilio, who just got hired full time. Those guys are big into the education space, and it's not just for players. We are educating staff on certain components too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a whole process there.
Yeah.
I mean, sticking on with pitchers, and I'll let Noah ask a question. But like, the Rockies are loaded with starting pitching talent, and like it's been recognized like as a top 5 talent. We've been saying it for years. Like you have the 3-headed monster who is probably all 3 are probably going to make their debuts this year in Palmquist, Dollander, and Soley. But like you can go down the line with Proshecki, Connor Stain, Jared Candy, who's a dog on the mound, Mahoney, Kaminska, Juarez. Like we could keep going. But like, how do you, as the guy at the head of everything, how do you kind of handle all of that talent and working through the system as you just keep going? I don't know.
Like, well, I mean, there's been years where I didn't think I'd ever have this conversation on my bingo card when we're going to have these type of problems,
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. And you look at, there's certain guys, we ran through a 6-man rotation in the ACL, Fresno and Spokane for a few years to develop more starting inventory. We were really light on the starting pitching side. Mm-hmm. And, I think we've gotten to where we've been able to close that gap now, to where, what you're hoping, take the 40-man guys out of AAA, but you're hoping, the other 2 spots are Palmquist and Dollander, mm-hmm. And then that gets into, another little crowded situation in Hartford where we're talking about setting up some piggybacks, and where you kind of alternate certain guys on piggybacks. So you're still getting guys that type of mound touch or that type of length to them, right? Yep. Because there's names that you're mentioning there that, we're not ready to put in the bullpen, and ultimately that's what they could be. But, I think what we've seen at the big league level is I'm not sure you ever have enough starting depth.
No, not at all.
At least in these last few years. And what I love about them is they're all different. I mean, I think you guys have talked to Chase. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's different than a lot of guys that we've taken. I mean, it is a swing and miss in the zone fastball. And it's one of the more dominating fastballs that I saw in the minor leagues, not just with our system, with the work ethic to boot. And then, Sean Sullivan is an outlier. That's an upshoot guy that pitches up. He rolls through it. A lineup knows exactly what's coming and can't square it up. It's like an invisible fastball.
It's so interesting watching him throw.
It's so interesting. When you meet him, you're like, okay, are you working in the R&D group now? I didn't know we were hiring. Oh no, you're the pitcher of the year in the Northwest League.
Yeah.
Getting Gabe back in that mix, and Palmquist is the other guy. I mean, that's an uber competitive, that really wants to attack hitters, and he's got a full mix with obviously some deception to boot. Not much of, he's got to be a little more fine. Obviously, Dolander can miss some spots and still blow by guys. So it is nice. And then that younger crew of, having Jace, who looks like he would be hitting 4-hole for you in the beer league softball, come out his first year and win the Cal League Pitcher of the Year. And, I think it speaks volumes to again, going back to the amateur process and what layers they're peeling back and what pieces of the puzzle they're able to put in place before we even have our touches on them.
Yeah. And I'm going to, I talked about Brody Brecht earlier. I'm going to switch to a hitter in our first round pick, or the Rockies' first round pick, Charlie Condon. I mean, I couldn't believe that he fell to 3. I know the whole Blake Street Banter staff, if you could call us that, we were so hyped. And he had a long year, played basically all summer, then got drafted, got into Spokane, wasn't great in the stint, but I mean, he just had such a long year. What do you think his kind of slow start could be attributed to? And was the assignment to Spokane a little too difficult, or was the hand injury in there nagging him at all? I'm just curious what you could say about number one, I think of the player that you're getting, and then number 2, kind of some insight into how difficult the first month and a half was for him.
Well, the player we're getting, I think, you're talking about a guy that's got light tower power to all fields. Behind the scenes, the work ethic, the makeup, the character, he is unbelievably humble. I met him and his parents, obviously, when we signed him, for a guy that walked out of a draft pick, a little firmer in the wallet than most. So you like how he looks in the outfield. He stays present. He's got intent to his work, which I love. And he looks every bit of a big league all-star, mainstay. Physically, we're going to get him. He's got a chance to pack on some muscle on that frame, and he's already got some muscle, but he's just that rangy frame. I think his dad played basketball in college. So you can kind of see that aspect of it. So I think we were, Noah, the same way. We're in that draft room, and you're kind of seeing things happen like that, and you're like, oh, okay, this is about to get real here. And then getting him in and getting him out to Spokane to start the year. There's several things that I think go through a first round pick's mind. Which is there is wanting to prove the team right. Not in an industry wrong for going 3rd when you were projected 1, but truly prove us right, and going into a team, there was a line-to-line team. I mean, that was our club this year. They were loaded. They had heavy expectations in winning, and he wanted to do everything in his power to help that team win. And then you had the hand injury on top of that. And we had some great talks, and, you do want the aspect of, having to dig deeper than you had to in college, even coming out of a college league like the SEC, which, at this point, I'm not sure who the weak sister is in that league. But, it's funny to hear it when you would hear it's a AA equivalent league. And then you talk to our guys from the SEC, they're like, it's not even A-ball. You're like, yeah, I know. Because everybody on this field's a pro player. Everybody on this field's got a chance to be in the big leagues. So I do think there was some pressing offensively. He came out of the gate okay, and then he wanted to kind of keep doing it. And then, the scouting reports started coming in. You'd start seeing him throw hard early, in, soft away. They were adjusting him a lot quicker than he adjusted to the league. to how they were throwing, and it was these teaching moments of being able to talk to them about, like, you got to understand that the scouting report that they are using, the advanced report, which we do obviously still in the minor leagues, is coming from your time in Georgia and your time with Team USA and your time in the Cape, and they are taking this into truly giving an attack plan to each and every one of their guys. So I do think him pressing, and I think the hand injury of wanting to toe the line, went at a point where it was good to get him down to Arizona for instructional league and slow things down a little bit, really get that looked at, really pick our spots when we were going to play him. We started playing defensively more, and then eventually we were able to get him some at-bats. But, the road to the big league starts in spring training 2025 for all those guys in the draft class. That first summer, this is where the laundry goes. This is the loop. This is how you tip the clubby. This is, you just want to teach them the beginnings of how to be a professional. That's it. So am I worried about it? No, I'm not. I truly trust everything that they did to get this guy. And then I'm going to love him getting some rest this offseason, and we'll build him back up and get him going.
Yeah, I think we agree. We're not really worried about him either. Yeah. But it's just hard not to be worried about a guy like that.
Well, you always worry about the punch. That's that with a lot of our guys, and going to the hitter thing. You're constantly trying to build hitters that don't chase, right? And know the zone and truly know what their hitting zone is or where they can do damage. And that's what this next generation of hitters, what you're trying to build for the Rockies. Because we have to get better in the minor leagues offensively, and we've got to get better at the big leagues offensively.
Yeah. Is there an emphasis at all in the organization about getting hitters to kind of elevate the baseball now, like as you're speaking of hitters and kind of where we're trying to get them to?
Well, I think there's more, you talk still, and some of the principles in hitting go back years, and to where it's not, kind of that manufactured, I'm going to get the ball in the air. It's truly a natural loft. How important it is to get on playing with a pitch, and the same thing, hit the ball hard, and naturally you're going to end up, if you've got a natural high finish, you're going to end up being able to elevate the ball, get it up in the air. But, you also don't want the flip side of guys just trying to club the ball out of the yard. And I think that one of the dynamics we've gone through this offseason, we started last year, and kind of our swing decisions and talking to guys with the swing decisions and certain things we do in the debrief and after each game is kind of go through that part of just teaching guys what they do well and what areas of the strike zone they can handle, what areas of the strike zone they can drive pitches, and it really doesn't matter what the pitch is. If you get it into this area, fire. So that's a big thing. I think, I was just I went up to the Cape, because one of the guys I worked for got in the Hall of Fame, but obviously Todd was there and Clint, and anytime you have a chance to talk to Todd about hitting, the strikeouts kill him a little bit every day.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that.
And it's not just at the big league level. It's not just in the minor leagues. It's in the amateur space. And you just can't believe the guys are just okay with striking out. And, and I do think you're starting to see the industry shift a little bit. As you saw in the playoffs, there were, teams philosophy-wise, like Washington Dodgers or even, the Padres prior to them getting knocked out, they are doing that through the system and growing a certain type of hitter, and it ultimately they've created lineups, and Dodgers are an outlier, right? We can't quite write those checks, or if we write them, we can't get them cashed for a while,
it's gonna take a minute.
Yeah, but but they do that with their minor leaguers, and then you end up with a lineup with such unbelievable length to it. To where there's no Punch and Judy guy hitting the 9-hole anymore. That guy can go up top.
Yeah. And that's been like Amador, like a guy like Amador, even Braden Ward to an extent, are just players that we're just infatuated with. Like, it takes us back to the quote unquote old school ways of baseball and the unicorn these days. But there can be a mix between the two.
It can be a mix, and I mean, a guy that walks more than he strikes out now in the minor leagues, you're like, okay, take some notice of that.
Yeah, that's gonna be like getting some headlines there.
Yeah.
I mean, and then like we're speaking about middle infielders, Del Amador, you got Ryan Ritter right next to him, who, like, has he exceeded your guys' expectations coming out of Kentucky as a glove first to turning into like the most consistent hitter in Hartford all last year?
I think that because you heard all of that in an industry, and I'm terrible in. I listen to people that you trust, and our scouts really saw a ton of upside in what it could do offensively, and as you dig into certain systems, and I know a little bit about what Kentucky does, there are some rigid college baseball programs. I'm not sure if they're one of them. We're going to hit this way, we're going to do it this way. And, ultimately, sometimes the freedom to be who you are can help a kid excel. And he's allowed the freedom to kind of grow. And, obviously what him and Nick Wilson, our hitting coordinator, do, it resonates. So I think once we saw the work, he's a strong kid. He was in a lineup that, to start the year in Hartford, that was a nice group. Yeah. And, he was the one kind of sticking out, and you're right, kind of keeping things together, from having a really consistent year. So I don't think once we got him in and truly kind of took the reins off him to just be yourself, be the best version of yourself. I don't think anybody was too surprised that he does have this type of capability in there.
Yeah. And like the rest of the middle infield prospects, you got Dion Jorge, you got Andy Perez, who I think is a nice little secret gem you guys have down there in Fresno, 20 years old, doing great things in Fresno last year. Just how hard is it to kind of manage these pockets of positions? Like you have 9 players on the 40-man in the outfield with 2 or 3 knocking on the door. You have this stacked middle infield. I mean, you got Kyle Karros, and Charlie Condon, who are going to be fighting for positions coming up. Like, how do you kind of manage all the talent that's there in each pool?
Well, I think, going to those shortstops, I mean, it was a decision collectively to split up Jorge and Perez last year. They were together that Fresno year, and you were kind of bouncing both. And, it's good from a versatility standpoint. Because ultimately you're not sure where everybody's going to end up. Because the shortstop in the big leagues is okay. And young.
Yeah.
I might add.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And you look at, so that's why we ended kind of splitting up to give priority positioning to Andy Perez in Fresno and some growth that he needs. He's still a very young player. And Jorge and so you looked at how that middle going up was, and going into the year, I felt really, really, really good about it. Of looking at having Andy Perez being able to play short, and honestly, he may end up being the best of the bunch. Truly, I don't even think we've scratched the tip of the iceberg of what he could be.
Yeah, watching him in Fresno last year was something special. Like there was just, when you just watch guys go, yeah, there's something there that's just unlocked. It hasn't been unlocked yet.
Getting stronger, getting a feel for how a swing works, being able to kind of repeat some things. I mean, it was really solid. And then getting him up, into, again, I talked about the Spokane environment. It's good for those guys to get up into a club where the expectations are high. Hey guys, I'm sorry, we expect to win the game every single night up here, and that was player led with that group. So I think that was a huge part in his development, is to kind of get up there, into, hey, okay, they're expecting me to do my job every night. The ball's on the ground near me, I need to catch it and throw it. I need to be able to move runners at the plate. I thought that was great, and I think that's a big feather in the cap to some of the guys that were up there, especially like a Kyle Karros, and how that clubhouse navigated this year.
Yeah, Kyle Karros. Yeah, we talked to him after he got his Gold Glove, which was astounding. And he's a guy that seems to put in the work ethic. He likes the work, like putting in the work with it. And I'm sure that's just being seen by a guy that's getting Gold Glove, has the pedigree, so to speak, that comes with it. You get a guy like Andy next to him, like, oh, okay, so this is a guy that I can work with and do things with, and it just helps everybody around. Like you said, the whole clubhouse, the whole vibe that goes with it.
Yeah, they had some personalities in there. I mean, it could have been a reality TV show at times.
Yeah.
You walk around and you see a Kyle Karras who's unbelievably steady and even keel, and then you come across Cole Carrick.
Yep.
Who knows what he's doing that day, or at the time Juan Guerrero or Bougarine, and you never know what you're going to get. But how they mesh together, and that's what you're trying to create in these environments of, obviously we put an emphasis on minor league wins a few years back. I'll die on the hill that you have to teach them how to win in the minor leagues too. You can't just, okay, we're going to develop you, and then now you get up to the big leagues. Now you got to win the game tonight, guy. So having guys like that, and trying to give guys like a Karros or even a Carrig, Sullivan, Dolan, or some of these guys the tools to be able to lead these type of clubhouses, to lead them organically, not some rah bullshit, but truly organically on knowing your teammates, leading your teammates, knowing yourself, and that's some of the stuff we've done in a high performance camp in January, of having some guys come in that actually put a curriculum in place to help these guys lean into it, when times get tough, which they will, naturally. They will, and probably showed up the most on that club, because we had a lot of those guys there at that camp.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. All right, we are at the 45-minute mark. Can we ask one more question each?
You can ask as many as you want, bud. Okay. I am just sitting here enjoying, because we got to talk about Robert Kalaz at some point.
He was ex Ashley Andujar. Like, we could go down the road.
Yes.
But
let's stay on Andujar for a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's really intriguing. He's going to come over this year. I'm really looking forward to, truly, as you kind of get him over into this space and letting him. It's going to be the strength component. You're going to be waiting a little bit on that, but how he plays the game, what you're seeing in his bat path now, how he works in the cage. I mean, this is a really intriguing guy. I can't wait to get him into spring training.
And with Robert Kalaz got a taste at the end of last year. He seemed to be pressing a little bit. He showed some flashes of just okay, it's in there. But also kind of the Charlie Condon route, little bit of pressing that was going along with it. But when you're looking at these ACL, DCL type guys, what are you kind of looking for to show that they're ready for the ACL or even that single A jump?
Well, I think, that's where Rolando and his staff do a fantastic job. Edison Laura is the field coordinator down there. So there's a lot of conversations, and what are you seeing from a maturity standpoint? There's a lot more freedoms here. We have a dorm down there. They go downstairs for the snack. They're watching TV, and it's basically everything's a little more controlled, and it's a gated complex like they all are. So, I mean, if you wanted to go over the wall and do some shenanigans, you got to earn it, And so, as they get over here and they get even into a place like the complex where there's quite a bit more regimen how the days look, it's still, the nights at the hotel. Our team hotel's a Scottsdale Plaza and Resort. How are they going to interact there? How are they going to interact with certain freedoms? What are they going to be putting into their bodies in the areas where we can't control it? Right? When you transition from having breakfast and lunch at the complex to having lunch and dinner, how are they doing that? What are they doing after hours? So I think it's all, they look at that and take a tremendous amount of pride. And when they send a guy over, he's going to be ready. And you don't know how they're going to react in the States. You truly don't. And you try to adjust to what we're doing culturally to acclimate them the absolute best you can. From the English second language classes to, what we're doing, say, strength and conditioning, it's such a foundational level down there. A lot of it's based on tryouts, and those kids are taught to run fast and throw hard and hit the ball with power, raw power. that you're teaching them the game down there, how to put the pants on, how to play the game. Any pitchers, he's got arm strength, but we have to teach the total delivery. And so sometimes that's why you're seeing the guys down there 1 or 2 years. Amador was an outlier a few years back because he played for the Dominican national team under the junior team. So he was kind of game ready when we got him. So I think it's important, and it's not definitely linear as they come over here that they're going to flourish.
Mm-hmm.
We'd have to have a beer. I could tell you all the Claus stories. But what becomes unbelievably so pure about guys like Claus when he comes over here is you just watch him do it, and you see all 5 tools, and obviously a Triple Crown winner in the ACL.
Mm-hmm.
And he really truly doesn't have an idea yet on how he's doing it. And that is something so unbelievably pure that you just love to see.
That's crazy.
Strong. He was late to the party with baseball. The story of even how he got into the game and how he had to be talked into jumping into games with some of the kids from his town. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
We'll make the adjustments to kind of constantly get him acclimated.
Yeah.
He'll need the help.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, like it's just that jump. Like it's a whole new culture, it's a whole new world. And like a guy like Kalana is like you're learning a whole new game. Like you could see some of the baseball intelligence, not to like be mean on it, but like it was missing on a few times in Fresno, like going to third when the ball was probably not something you should be going to third on. Just like that learning curve, like that rawness coming of it.
And you want to keep the aggressiveness in place, right? And then that's where the game kind of helps us a ton. The more we can get him on bases, the more we can get those outfield plays to where he's seeing it. The more he's starting to recognize why we do this early work and how that translates to the game. It's all going to come. I mean, he's got a chance to be a real special player.
Yeah, I'm excited for his progression through it. What about Luigi Casilla? He's just a big 19-year-old that throws 97 miles an hour. What else you got on him?
It is a massive, massive arm. Where you kind of do a double take to seeing him in spring training, like, oh my gosh, and it is huge. It's got life to it as well. I thought the strides that he made to, he's a deep count guy right now because his stuff is really good, that, he's still learning how to show hints of command. He's never going to be a command guy, and we just kind of need to get him to the areas, right? He's never going to pinpoint it. I mean, everybody likes to talk about Maddox, and, I think the days of Maddox are done. You watch him on MLB Network, and, but just, we'll constantly refine what he's doing and truly how he's doing it. And when you watch him and he's timed up on the mound, I mean, the stuff is absolutely electric. And it's from the Magic side of the mound, And so, I'm looking forward to, now that he's been over here and he's kind of competed in that environment, getting to the night games, which is the first time they'll play night games when they get over, and getting used to kind of the quote unquote affiliate life. We're expecting big things from him down the road.
Yeah, he's definitely a name we're watching.
Yeah.
We're gonna go back up to AAA. Dugan Darnell, he's our guy.
I know he is. I know you guys love Dugan.
He's Double D. Just give us something about Double D. I just want to hear you talk about Dugan.
And that's the thing. I mean, it's a type of self-promoting that you probably haven't seen since the 1980s hair bands that were putting flyers up on trees to get people into the,
Yeah.
He sent all 30 clubs, and not only 30 clubs, he blanketed 9 or 10 people within those clubs to even get a shot to come into spring training, and, obviously his track is not anywhere near the norm, He was, I think, a third baseman closer. And I can't remember. You guys will know what school he went to. I have no idea.
Adrian College up in Adrian, Michigan, D3.
Yeah. Yep. And when he's right, And we've seen him right. Obviously, you saw those years in Hartford where it's mid to upper 90s, and when he's tunneling that split off that fastball, I mean it's lethal. It's a very tough at bat. I think the key is you get to the upper levels and guys start kind of catching you. It's hard to send a guy to Albuquerque 3 years in a row. It truly is. You know, I mean that's just shy of a work release program there. You know, it's a hard environment to pitch in.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you look at, you know, his consistency piece is going to be the next step that, you know, you have to trend, and that's the key to it. And right now he's got to be at a place where he's going to need some help. You know, he's got to be on the trend, and there's something happens in the big leagues, or that he start to get recognized, and all of a sudden Buddy calls me and said, what do we got? You know, is it time to give him a shot? I mean, we saw it with Julian Fernandez a few years back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was time for Julian to just see what he can do at the big league level, period. You know, we won't know until he gets up here, and that's where you're hoping for Duke.
Yeah. Yeah. We're hoping he's one of those first calls that gets up there. Definitely hoping he makes that crack there. And then just kind of a general question. Zach Kokoska, he's a friend of the pod too. Just curious of like what the thought process with him just kind of facing right-hand pitching exclusively. I don't see that a lot in the minor league. I mean, he actually crushed right-hand pitcher. It has that sneaky pop in there.
Yeah, he does have some sneaky pop.
Why not let him eat against the lefties a little bit? Like,
you know, he's done that a little bit. You know, and I think the line items from last year that you look at, and obviously you look at the home runs, you know, where I think the growth needs to be as now he's reached the upper levels is truly, you know, how his plan and approach has got to get refined, you know, into it can't just be going up there and I'm going to try to go up top. You know, I mean, the pitcher has a say in how that goes. You know, so that's a lot of dialogue that we had with him this year. You know, defensively, he worked his ass off to be, you know, a playable first baseman.
Yeah.
You know, he called me one off season. So what do you think about adding this? You know, and I'd like to do that. I'd like to have guys that have some versatility because also I think it grows them within a game, you know, that they can do both. He can run out to the corner outfield and play first. And he kind of took that, which I love guys doing that, asking that question. So they're taking ownership of their career. The power is real. You know, we've got to kind of be able to string together a series of good at bats. And you're right. I mean, you know, to be a big league everyday type guy, he's going to have to be able to hit both. So I'm hoping, you know, as he takes a hold of his player plan for this offseason, that's a big part of what he tries to kind of refine, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes sense. That's fair.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
He's a K-State guy too, which is hard for me as I went to KU, but I deal with it. He's a good kid.
Yeah, there's that bad blood there. We don't really have a Kansas guy in the system anymore. Blake Goldsberry was the guy.
Yeah, Blake was the guy. Mm-hmm. We've got a couple guys that, you know, Messenger retreated, bounced out of KU for University of Texas. You know, got a couple guys working for us. Aaron Hahn, our minor league clubhouse manager, is a KU guy. You know, we may have another KU guy in the works. You know,
some in there.
Yeah,
that's fun. Noah, you got a last question?
Yeah, I've just got one kind of general one, and it's about a big leaguer, Brenton Doyle. He came out of a really small school, ended up really having all the tools. Speed was kind of his calling card and his excellent defense. Then, you know, in his first year, he ends up being, by some metrics, one of the worst qualified hitters in the sport. When you see a guy go from that amount of offensive production and then one off season later, you know, he arguably could have represented the Rockies at the All-Star game, got the Player of the Month award in July. Like, how encouraging is that to preach to young guys? Like, look, one off season can change this much of your game. And then I guess the second part is, you know, did you go to Brenton after that and say, hey man, like, how on earth did you do all this in 60 days?
Well, a lot of the talk and how the offseason was going to look started well into the year prior. You know, him and Bam Bam and PJ and Andy Gonzalez start talking about certain adjustments that needed to be made. It's hard to do during the year, right? When you're playing every day, and obviously they needed them out. You know, in the minor leagues, if we were going to make those type of adjustments, occasionally I would unplug a guy and send him and Nick Wilson down to Arizona. You know, I have that ability. Obviously, you don't have that ability at the big leagues. You know, let's head down to Arizona. We're going to get you in the performance lab. We're going to retool a couple things and see how it feels for you. But you know, it was something he wanted to do. You know, a feeling, and we saw pockets where he would get. He's a very strong kid, and I remember when we first got him. We were still running in Grand Junction at that time, and I remember being up there seeing him, and I'm like, "How in the world did you get to Shepherd?" You know, because you have to Google a place. And you know, he had signed his letter of intent to Virginia Military Institute. I think you guys know the story, and then ultimately kind of found out that that's not how he wanted to be. But then went up to the Cape and got on everybody's radar. You know, it wasn't a matter of when he was going to, or that he was going to get drafted. It was truly a matter of when. You know, and that's Brenton Doyle's Bill Schmidt 101. You know, a guy that looks like a strong safety, that athleticism in the middle of the diamond. That is, you know, Bill was going to get him come hell or high water. And we saw him, you know, you'd see how the grip was. And obviously, you know, I don't know what type of work they were doing at Shepherd or anything like that. But he just didn't have a truly feel for what he could do, where he could impact the ball. You know, in Grand Junction, I mean, you know, it's 302 down left field line. So, I mean, that stuff was playing pretty good. We saw a certain adjustment in Hartford that he went to on kind of where he was holding his hands, and he looked a lot more free, you know, so he looked a lot more athletic to me, quicker swing instead of just this strength trying to get it through there. And then he kind of reverted back once he debuted it. You know, the unfortunate part about the big leagues is, you know, you can have a plan and approach, but then ultimately you step in there and you're chasing hits, you know, and he was really pressing to chase hits. You know, you look up on the video board and you see a batting average, you know, and I think all those things came into play with him really wanting to make these changes in the offseason. And to his point, I mean, he did exactly what he said he was going to do. You know, which is fantastic. And he did not go back to it, you know. And so now I think this version that you're seeing, and obviously now he's not a secret, you know, is what the expectation is going forward, you know, and to be a mainstay in that lineup. Obviously, you know, you talk to a guy like Darryl Scott, and you know who he wants playing center field or Coors Field, you know. I mean, who he wants playing shortstop, who he wants playing third. But now offensively, you've got a guy that actually is going to be a factor for us.
Yeah, it's huge. Follow up on that, and then we'll let you go. Who's faster of the three, Braden Ward, Cole Carrick, or Brenton Doyle?
Out of those three, it's Braden Ward.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw another name out to you because I bring it up to Braden Ward all the time. Caleb Hobson may have Braden Ward.
Dude, Caleb Hobson is insane.
He can fly.
Watching him play in center, like he was like Superman out there, man.
Yeah. And I think that he is a guy that is really intrigued. We talked about it. I love speed. You know, obviously Bill's thing is power. You know, I love speed. When we have a chance to get those type of runners, you just say, hey, let's get Caleb Hobson in the system. I mean, UT Martin, you know, they don't have a batting cage. Let's see what we can make out of a kid like this. He works his ass off at it. But I always love every time I talk to Braden, I was like, kind of like bringing it up. I was like, I was just impressed. I think Hobson still got you, man. I'm sorry, you know. And you know, I was like, you know, and I like making the joke. You're not as young as you used to be, and maybe you want to shave off that mustache and get some aerodynamic back. But
I don't know. That mustache is pretty glorious.
Yeah, I got a question for you guys.
Okay.
Why haven't we talked about Zach Agnos?
Tell
me
he's so many names to talk about, man.
We could go Kate
Hinton, Sam Weatherly, Zach Agnos, man.
Tell me he's been on the pod.
Yeah, a few times, and
because I mean that personality is pretty fantastic.
Yeah,
really genuine, and he's a real deal. I mean, it's been fun to watch. You know,
so,
he still tells me he can hit, right? Because he hit at East Carolina, and you know I'm not buying that. But you know, since he's been a pitcher only, and you've seen kind of this routine that he's put himself into, It's developed a lot faster than I thought it would. You just never know what you're going to get on guys like that. Never threw bullpens in college because he was playing shortstop and had to, was the closer. So he never had time to kind of work on some craft pieces.
Yeah. He mentioned that. Mentioned that a few times. Just like
yeah.
The first year in Fresno was just learning to be a pitcher and how to sequence, and then honing it all in last year in Spokane and Hartford. It's just, he's impressive. Like, and so like, I guess on that conversation, then I want to ask a conversation about like a Kate Denton type. Like you have a two-way guy like Zach Agnos. How does that conversation start? Like, hey, we're thinking about taking you, but we're going to take you as a pitcher,
and that's exactly how it starts.
Okay.
I think he was at the USA trials that summer. And, whether it was Zarnicki and Demon or Gus or Mike Erickson, they kind of saw him and he raised some eyebrows. His stuff has such a lateness to it. That cutter he throws is really late. Obviously, he's in constant attack mode, loves to attack hitters. Last year, really getting a feel for we knew who he was, because I could call him right now, he didn't answer, or he'd be in like something very odd like hot yoga, and then he'd call me at 10:30 at night when I'm sleeping. That's just how the kid is.
Yeah.
But you're starting to see a guy that really has kind of a laser focus on how he wants to be, and we went to and Cade falls in this category too of trying to create more of those leverage inning guys. Not just, okay, you're quote unquote the closer here in Hartford, et cetera, but really having a committee of 3 or 4 guys that are going to close some games. Sometimes the game is closed in the 6th inning, but really having these guys to put them in situations in the minor leagues, to where I'm coming into a situation that's got some teeth to it, and it's going to be up to me to keep this game where it is, and it was early on, you recognize that he was going to be one of those guys. And that's the type of plan you had. We kind of got Jaden Hill into that mode, right? We got Halverson into that mode. We got Sheeby into that mode. We're still kind of gaining traction with Juan Mejia, Kay Denton, some of these guys, kind of growing them into coming into that type in the game, where there's some traffic and we've got to keep it right here. We're up by 1. That's your job. So that you kind of create an environment in the big leagues where, okay, I've been here before. I realize there's a third deck and there's a purple dinosaur walking around, but I've been here, and kind of maybe slow the heartbeat down. But guys like I don't have a manager that doesn't want Agnos in the back at the bullpen.
Yeah.
I just don't. They all want to use him in that closing role.
Yeah, there's just something special about Agnos, like with that movement and the control that it's just, as a shortstop in college, to just pinpointing all of his stuff. Like, he doesn't walk. He might have averaged 3.5 pitches in that bat, like something crazy. Like, he knew how to just get guys out, and it's just fun to watch. Like when you have guys that can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I firmly believe he's got a chance to debut this year.
Yeah.
He's going to be in a good spot to get up there and show what he can do.
After our boy Dugan, right?
Yeah. That's up to Dugan.
Yeah, and I know he's already he's in the lab. He's putting it in. I know
there's no doubt. He's throwing a bullpen as we speak, and probably like it's not a normal 25 pitch touch and feel. He's throwing like a 60 pitch bullpen as we speak.
Yeah,
that's how he goes.
That's how he works. And then Kate Ditton, same kind of conversation. And when we talked to him after he was drafted, he was trying to figure out if he wanted to be a starter or reliever, which blew my mind that you got the National NCAA Reliever of the Year guy deciding if he wants to be a starter.
I know.
How does that conversation happen?
Well, I think that conversation of truly, sometimes you see mindsets. We had a lot of dialogue about Jaden Hill. We've had a lot of dialogue about a lot of guys, and you've talked to Sam Weatherly, who's a very intelligent kid, unbelievably personable. And him and I were talking in the outfield one day, and he broke it down. Just like that starting thing. For some guys that becomes an anxiety-filled week. The guys that are experts at it know what they're doing on a Monday, and how it should look on a Tuesday and the bullpen on a Wednesday. And then now I'm going to start on Saturday and my recovery on Sunday. You know, they've got that plan down and they love it. But some of these guys that we've taken that have been starters, I mean, it is a tough week. They're looking down the barrel, you know, to their start. And some of the guys are better coming out and not knowing when they're going to throw, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, for me, I think Caden Denton has a chance to fly through a system, you know, based on that type of coming in there and sprinting, showing that he can kind of go back to back or, you know, once you get to the big leagues, sometimes 3 days in a row, a la Victor Vodnik, sometimes 4, you know. And, you know, when you kind of talk about how their track looks or how we look at it, we're having the same dialogue right now about Connor Eaton. You know, I mean, I asked him, I said, okay, you went up there in that bullpen role. What do you think? And he flat out told me, because I'd never done it before. And I love it because he wants to touch the mound as much as possible. You know, multiple touches in a series. And, you know, obviously Connor Eaton, if we ultimately put him in the bullpen, that is a guy that's going to fall into those leverage relievers, you know.
How do you guys find a guy like Connor Eaton? Just that out of George Mason, lefty. We were just talking to Stephen Rice before we just got that done doing that. And it's just like Connor Eaton, like he predicted Connor Eaton being in the pros in 2 years. And like you see this guy out of what is Gulf Coast or George Mason?
George Mason.
George Mason. Like how does he stay in George Mason for all that time? Then how do you guys find a guy like this, like high 90s lefty?
I think that staying at the George Mason thing kind of shows a lot about the kid. You know, he talks about, I made a commitment to this place. I like it. He's a Virginia kid. You know, he's got a cousin playing pro ball. You know, how you find him is truly, I mean, that's the beauty of being an area scout. You know, that's the job. You know, I mean, it's easy to have an area where, you know, you're Sean Gamble down in Georgia and you got Condon in your area. You know, but where the area guys make their name is at day 3, you know, where a guy like Garlotti goes and sees George Mason and sees this guy and then starts digging in on the makeup and digging in on the work ethic and meeting with the player and really has a lot of conviction and wanting to take a guy like this. Then you start looking into the metrics and you start looking into his stat lines, you know, and really diving in and recognize, okay, this may be one of the outliers, you know. And Connor Eaton I used to talk about when I was scouting, you know, I had South Texas for a few years and you'd have programs like Rice at that time when Wayne was still there and Augie was at the University of Texas and Childress was at A&M. You know, those were the layups. You know, those were unbelievably good programs. But boy, you go look at those guys at Texas State or Sam Houston State and they just had a chip on their shoulder. And you'd love to get those guys out and watch them develop in the system and watch how they work and watch how they play with some edge, you know. And that's where I think a guy like Connor Eaton becomes such an asset to us, you know, is that he wasn't a fanfare pick. It was a guy that you guys probably had to Google when we took him. Like, who the hell's this guy?
I mean, Tyler didn't have to, but we did.
Yeah. And so, you know, I mean, that's what you love about the draft, right? Is, you know, it's trying to figure out where UT Martin was and Austin P and you know, George Mason and then getting these guys into kind of the arena where they're buying in not only to what we're doing or how we're doing it, but who they're with, you know. And that's what I love about when we get these new draft classes and meeting guys like Connor Eaton, you know, who is probably wearing tree camo as we speak. You know, I mean, he's one of those guys, but that's why I think he stayed at George Mason. You know, I've committed to a place, I'm going to stay.
Yeah, and there is a lot to say about that kind of person. Like that
it's pretty rare, right? Pretty rare really nowadays. Yeah.
I love that. All right, I'm going to end it here because I have to get up in about 5 hours. But Chris, I appreciate you hanging out and doing this. I would love to run it back sometime soon.
Absolutely.
It's the fun and the insight that goes along with it. So thank you for hanging out with us and just continue doing the great things with the Rockies minor league system. Like you can see the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a huge shift across the board, and we're seeing it, we're recognizing it, and you're starting to see the dividends. So
I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
You bet. You bet.
Right. Go Rocks.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Thank you for watching and listening. Please check out our link tree for more content.